다 조제기 우리 담바가는 로킹 요도 시는 동화단 땡시 민지에 잡고 만 로이 아니 생긴 문진기 담바란 점바 코와라 cham바 대라게 생긴당 민지 건배 열시네 다 생긴 대당지게 동말게 담조다 겜바세 세도 다 생긴 대당지 민지 전부 용의 용도 강구리 송아.
As we have already heard this morning from among the instructions by our teacher, it's those who are immersed in the ocean of suffering because they find themselves under the influence of the fundamental error of holding appearances and phenomena for real, towards whom we must extend our loving kindness and compassion. They are the ones who should be the objects of our compassion, towards whom we should practice such compassion. And this is basically, one could say, the preliminary, that which comes before anything else. Once we have extended our compassion to these, we have understood how they are immersed in their error and how that causes them untold sufferings. Once we have then given rise to this compassion, we can then give rise to the wish from the bottom of our hearts that we wish them to be free of such suffering. We wish them to see for themselves how things truly are. Now, endowed with this initial impulse, one could say, we then set out to practice all sorts of other practices which lead ourselves to more and deeper understanding of all of these things by way of shamatha, vipassana, mahamudra, etc. How to implement such kindness and compassion towards others, how to do so with an essential practice. We have already heard about it this morning. It is the very essence of that which is, or it is an essential practice as it is taught within the course of the instructions that are known as the 7 points of mind training, which have also been composed by a teacher. And the very most essential of all of these practices is the one which is known as exchanging yourself with others, which is known as the practice of sending and taking, or known by its Tibetan name of Tonga, which is an integral part of this mind training practice of our teachers. When opening ourselves towards others in this way, when giving rise to the enlightened attitude, opening our hearts for the welfare and the help of others, then it goes without saying that this will of course not be a path or an endeavor that will be free of obstacles. Of course there will be many problems and obstacles. We will encounter them for the most part all of the time. But we have to learn how to deal with all of these obstacles and hindrances, all the problems that might present themselves upon such a path. And we have to learn how to deal with them in such a way as to make them part of the path, or as it is literally called, to bring them onto the path.
the chocolate over that and the chocolate less on it, then I some good one more younger do. They do that's sentient tongue, the chocolate over can, yeah, but the Tatang around and the chocolate over. Tela Tambarshu. Sentient tongue in the chocolate do the Charashu. That end our sauna, then in the chocolate over the gave it a source and general.
Now, how to deal with these various circumstances that have to be brought onto the path? How do we do so? And we again find the way, the method that is to be applied in the teachings of Atisha and the teachings on mind training. And he summarizes this entire complex in 3 short sentences, or rather even words, by way of saying 3 circumstances, 3 poisons, and 3 antidotes, 3 roots of virtue. Sorry. And the first one that he describes, or the first one that is then being described while commenting upon these words, is the situation that we very often encounter, which is the kind of situation in which we come across something agreeable, something desirable. We encounter a desirable object, and the immediate result of this encounter is that desire or even covetousness appears within ourselves. We want that object. All of a sudden we seem to lack that object. We all of a sudden are very unhappy not to possess that object, and by all means we want to bring that object or circumstance, or whatever it might be, into our possession. And we are willing to go quite a far ways to do so. In this way we suffer the lack of that object, which heretofore was not a problem at all, because we hadn't encountered it. Now, instead of just letting ourselves fall under the influence of this situation, of such a reaction, we could then step back and take a second and think, wait, it's not only me, myself, who suffers from such covetousness, from such desire, but also all other beings, time and again, encounter such situations. Therefore, wouldn't it be useful, wouldn't it be beneficial for myself and all others if all of the suffering that is being brought about through such desire, through such covetousness, through that seeming lack of something that by all means we have to possess, if all of that came to fruition within myself, and if all others came to be free of that. So in this way, having encountered such a situation, having encountered the reaction that is being triggered by such a situation, we can then make it into a root of virtue by way of wishing others to become free of such problems in the first place.
Caucus, your men are ranging the shot of Shadong over Yungre. That end of Shadang over Chonga, that's Saint Tangil and then our Shadang over Yuri. Shadang less on it, then Yarwa last over Dongamumbo Yungre. They ended that Saint Tangil, Saint Shadang, your body, Marang Shadong Tamber. Saint Tangil, Shadang, Tarwash.
Another type of situation we might find ourselves in is a disagreeable one. The situation, the circumstance is disagreeable, or we encounter a disagreeable object that we feel aversion towards. It is a situation that we want to avoid, or it is an object or a person, for that matter, that we do not want to encounter. The reaction to such a circumstance, to such a situation, for the most part, is to fall under the influence of anger or possibly even hatred. Now, we could, of course, allow ourselves to be swept away by that hatred or anger, but we would be much better advised to, at that particular moment, remind ourselves of the fact that no benefit is being brought about by that whatsoever, that rather we should look at that anger and remind ourselves of the fact that such anger or hatred, whatever you want to call it, brings about untold sufferings. And if we take this a step further, we could then remind ourselves that not only we ourselves again and again fall under the influence of that emotional defilement, but that all other beings constantly see themselves in that particular situation as well. We could then take it yet another step further, and instead of allowing ourselves to be overwhelmed by such anger or hatred, to give rise to the wish, to the aspiration from the bottom of our hearts that not only may our own anger and hatred be pacified, but may also the anger and hatred of all other beings and the results that it brings about come to fruition within ourselves, so that all these other beings who equally again and again encounter such situation may become free from the result of falling under the influence of anger, which is for the most part untold suffering. So in this way, yet again, we can turn that potentially negative situation, that potentially harmful situation, and even more harmful results that results out of reacting blindly, into a root of virtue. The third type of situation that we could find ourselves is one of indifference. Whatever we encounter, whatever sorts of people we find ourselves together with, whatever objects may come across our path, we're utterly indifferent towards them. They do not particularly interest us, they do not cause us any pleasure or pain, they're just plain of an indifferent nature. Such indifference, which occasionally occurs in certain situations of that type, is in itself a manifestation of ignorance, one could even say of stupidity. There's no particular benefit in such situations, nothing really derives thereof in any which way. And it simply manifests that whatever stupidity or ignorance is manifest within our own mind streams. That in itself is not a particularly helpful situation, and no particular benefit derives thereof. Therefore, whenever one finds oneself in such a situation, one could, for instance, wish that whatever feelings or whatever manifestations of indifference or ignorance, stupidity for that matter, other beings suffer from, may that come to fruition within myself. Because this indifference or this stupidity is actually the root cause of our constant wandering again and again within samsara, from one rebirth to the next, without any let-up. In order to make others free from this, or at least to wish so that others may be free of this, we could, whenever we encounter such circumstances, wish that may all of that indifference, may all of this stupidity, all of this ignorance come to fruition within myself, may other beings become utterly free from it, so they can cease to continuously, aimlessly wander within this cycle of existence. And on top of that, we can find ourselves in all sorts of other situations under the influence of all sorts of other emotional defilements. We could find ourselves influenced by pride or arrogance. We could find ourselves influenced by jealousy and whatever else there is in the way of emotional defilements that might manifest. Whenever such a situation of whatever kind arises, one would have occasion to turn this potentially negative, or for the most part also useless situation into something positive, into something useful. By way of praying, may all other beings who similarly suffer from such or other emotional defilement become free of this emotional defilement. May they become free of the results that the influence of these defilements brings about. So this is a way which allows us to turn any potentially negative or any potentially negative situation or circumstance into something useful. We all know the situation of being sick, of experiencing sickness and pain and all the misery that causes. Similarly, such situations can also be turned to an advantage, can be turned into something useful by way of making aspirations and prayers that may all beings who suffer similar sickness or any kind of sickness for that matter be free of such sickness. May they be free of the cause of such sickness, and may all of that come to fruition within myself, who for the time being is suffering from such sickness anyway. Again, in this way, instead of just suffering away quietly or not quietly, we could make this into something useful. We could make an active, positive use of this sickness and wish and pray that whatever causes for sickness and pain other beings might encounter, that they may be free of this, that they may come to fruition within myself, so that all other beings may not have to encounter this situation, may not have to suffer through that misery of pain and sickness, and that they can then quickly and speedily proceed upon the path that leads to the achievement of awakening. Now, if we were to ask what's the point and what's the benefit of practicing in this way, this is very easily, very clearly answered. Consider or imagine that you would suffer from a sickness with all the corresponding pain and whatever goes along with it, all the misery of such. That is, of course, caused by your own negative deeds. Sometime in the past you have committed a negative deed which results in that pain and that sickness and that negative experience right now. So you'd have to suffer through this anyway, no matter what. It would not be avoidable. You could, of course, choose to simply, dumbly suffer through this. Let it be at that and then get on with things. But why not use that opportunity to turn this negative experience into something positive? Since you have to suffer through it anyway, and you cannot avoid it, why not turn it into something useful? And exactly in that moment, that particular instruction that we have just received comes into play. We could, instead of simply suffer for the sake of suffering, turn it into something useful by way of hoping, of wishing and praying that all the similar suffering and other sufferings as well, of other beings may come to fruition within our own suffering, so that our own suffering is not only not useless, but becomes something useful by way of freeing others of such suffering. That will bring about immeasurable benefit, not only for others, but also it will bring the cause of our own suffering to its eventual exhaustion. So in this way, great benefit not only for ourselves but also for others is being brought about. And since that is a very useful means to work with such negative circumstances and experiences, why not use the opportunity that arises anyway, unavoidably, and turn it into something useful instead of just sitting through it, suffering through it dumbly and uselessly. And then there are also situations which we all know very well, during which we do not feel any particular pain. We are not particularly sick in any which way. But nevertheless, we still feel downcast, we feel depressed, we are devoid of any joy or happiness, and everything just seems to pass us by, and we feel utterly joyless, luckless, etc. Similar instruction is to be applied in such a situation, because not only we ourselves find ourselves in such circumstances occasionally, but all other beings as well, which could also turn into an obstacle. Therefore, again, as we are advised to deal with sickness, with pain, we're also advised to deal with such situations in the very same way. We could wish, we could pray, we could make aspirations that whatever feelings of feeling downcast, being depressed, being joyless and luckless others experience, may all of that come to fruition within myself. Will all of that come to ripen within my own feeling of some such situation in any given moment, and may others become free of this of these experiences, so that they can proceed upon the path. In this way, even such more or less indifferent situations can be turned into something useful, into something beneficial. There's a further instruction which is to be applied in the moment of dying, or at least while preparing for death. It is to be found in the famous retreat manual known simply as the Mountain Dharma by the great first Karma Chagma Rinpoche, in which there are many short instructions which are to applied by retreatants, as the text is called, Mountain Dharma, by those who go into mountain retreat, into remote areas to practice in seclusion there. And it is said when the moment to die has come, or when the moment to die draws near, you should make a vast offering of all of your possessions, whatever remains in your possession, whatever you have elsewhere, house, property, wealth, whatever it might be. Imagine all of this as a vast mandala offering, and offer it so that you have no more attachment to it in the moment of death. then imagine either your own root lama above the crown of your head, or imagine the Buddha Amitabha, or whatever Yidam deity you have been practicing. But make sure that if you imagine in this way, to consider that Yidam or the Buddha Amitabha to be inseparably one with the root lama. As you clearly imagine the lama in this way, you would then continue to inhale and exhale, and as you practice exhalation, you give away to all beings all your happiness, all your joy, and the root thereof. And as you inhale, you imagine how all the negativity, the pain and sickness of beings and the causes thereof are being absorbed into yourself. If one were to practice in this way, just before death, if one were to prepare oneself in this way, in order before one moves into the intermediate state between death and after death and before the next rebirth, Rinpoche says that would be of extremely great benefit for both yourself as well as all other beings.
I don't send you come to that. And Nasa living Gala don't have yellow. Then it's Saint Tangila, Joa to the me about Saint Tangila living. Hey, you do? I don't Tangila, they left a capsule, Dan the Diana, Ran the Guru, Sonon than the Tango, gone to the Jibru. Tenga, Sana Titi, Yona, Sony, Unity don't have the Leper Capsule, Lonely opposite to the one. Tata, the same Yagura, Tata, he did Yellow and Majawazi. So you Nasa the Taka, good and Nasa the Kaguna Kaguna, they can't touch you, man. That is some sort of here.
Invariably, we will all, each and every one of us, sooner or later, encounter suffering. We will be sick, we will feel pain, we will feel depressed, we will feel cross and angry and whatnot, and eventually we'll also have to die. It's just no way around it. Try as you might, there's no way to avoid it. Now Rinpoche says he has just been explaining these instructions, and it would be useful if we would take them to heart now, wouldn't it? Sitting here, listening to Rinpoche's instructions and having forgotten all about them already before we're out of the shrine room again, that would be rather pointless now, wouldn't it? So therefore these instructions are to be taken to heart. They are to be practiced whenever the situation arises. Whenever such situations of sickness, of pain, of depression, or whatever arises, then these instructions are to be applied. Otherwise, why listen to them in the first place? Wouldn't that be a waste of time? So whenever, the next time, we feel pain, whenever we feel sick, and eventually when the moment of dying is upon us, we should, instead of complain and cry, think, well, this is just exactly what I've been waiting for. This is the opportunity in which I can train myself for my own benefit as well as the benefit for others. Now, that said, let it be said one more time, these instructions are to be applied. If they're not applied, well, then they're just that much empty words which need not have been spoken. So stop and get on with it.
Nyamli Yabo, Sengen Tangi, the Rinchevik Gala, the Nima Song Yunza, Nima Dain, Nima, and 2 down like you, the Yugan the what? And then Tela, 2 down the Tindo, December, Tindo. 2 down Yoga, the younger, then a Yaka young. Nyama song to dine last over Tela Tani, Chama Yunga Mare, Book for Mare, Messembono. I
forgot to say before that the body stays upright of such a practitioner. The body stays upright for 3 days, 5 days, sometimes even more than that, for as long as the mind of that practitioner remains in meditative concentration, samadhi. Only when that dissolves, does the body then eventually fall over or slump. Now, how is it possible that such a thing happens? It is only possible if someone has practiced Mahamudra or any other methods of such sort, for that matter, during their lifetimes. Only if during their lifetimes they have put whatever instructions along these lines they have received into practice, that such signs are possible. For someone who has not practiced such instructions, such signs of accomplishment will, of course, also not occur.
Yeah, it's question time again.